So I really think I need to start reading more literary fiction. Before I talk about this book, I do want to just mention that I'm generally more of a genre reader. I read a lot more fantasy, a lot more science fiction, and while some of the books that I have read have been more literary, so for example, I think Monk and Robot is definitely a more literary form of science fiction. I think, I also think some of the books like Parable of the Sower is a little bit more literary. I haven't really gone into contemporary literature a lot. Between Beautyland and this book, I really do feel like it's something that I need to explore outside of my genre horizons. So I'm looking forward to maybe reading a little bit more literary fiction in 2025. I Think We've Been Here Before is a book that, this book was recommended to me by a friend, the same as Beautyland. I like both books. This book follows a family as they navigate the end of the world. A news report happens on Thanksgiving that informs the world that 2 gamma ray bursts have occurred at the edge of the solar system, and that these gamma ray bursts are going to destroy all life on Earth. We then follow this family, each one taking the point of view at various chapters as they navigate the end of the world and their own deaths. I think this book, it's very interesting. There are, almost immediately there were things about this book that I globbed onto. I think there are some aspects that are just interesting. The way that the characters sort of come to terms with wanting to deal with the end of the world. So as an example, Nora is one of the main characters. She's the daughter. She's living in Europe after going through a bad breakup. Her way of dealing with it is that she doesn't talk to her family because she wants to have figured out how she's going to get home before she talks to them. She doesn't want to talk to them until she has things figured out. And I think that is a very interesting and kind of relatable. I think relatable in terms of wanting to be seen as an adult. In fact, most of her chapters, there are these things where she kind of laments that people in the world, her friends, her family, even her ex, treat her as though she's incapable of taking care of herself. That is a little bit, she almost rebels against that by trying to be so hyper independent and hyper capable. Marlon and Hilda are Nora's parents. Marlon has been diagnosed with a terminal form of cancer, and at the same time that he tells the family is the same time that the news breaks. There are some real moments in these early chapters before you find out that the world is going to end, when Marlon is telling his family about his diagnosis, and you get to see their various ways of dealing with it. In particular, it's pretty obvious that he and Hilda need different things. He wants to joke about the cancer. He wants to joke about his death, and his wife really needs to not joke about it. She needs it to be serious in a serious conversation. This sort of dovetails into how all of the characters, again, deal with the end of the world. Hilda ends up painting the entire house with these murals. Marlon has started writing a book before the end of the world, and he ends up finishing this book. And he sits on it. He doesn't want to show it to Hilda or to the rest of his family because he's afraid that they won't understand the novel. It's really kind of sad in a way. I think one of my favorite quotes in this novel, it's from early on. One second. So I think that there are a lot of quotes in this book that I really gravitated towards. There's one in particular from early in the book, and it says, "It feels like a riddle. What do you do when now is too soon, but there is no later?" This idea that everybody is trying to do the things that they never had the time to do, and how do they do them? You know, and there's a lot of like really important conversations that you know, they're running out of time, but they don't get to have these conversations, and so they have to have them now. And that, you know, I think that that's an important theme throughout the book. The other thing with this book that I think is interesting is throughout the book, characters have this feeling of deja vu, as though they've lived through the events of the book before in subtle ways. So characters feel like they know characters who they've never met. Characters have memories. There's inconsistencies in the book. In one chapter, Nora's cat is at home with her mom, and in another chapter, the cat is in Europe with her. You know, there are chapters where characters have memories of the world being slightly different. This idea that there are other lives that maybe they are seeing into. As I was reading this book, I kept thinking about a thing. I don't even know if I want to keep this in the video, but as I was reading this book, I kept thinking about when my dad died when I was a kid. There was a part of me that as a way of dealing with that and processing it, I became preoccupied with this idea that maybe what happens when we die is that in some other universe, some other life, we continue on as though we didn't die. And I used to imagine what that life was like, because I didn't get to have a relationship with my father, but some other Elise could have had a relationship with her father. And so I used to imagine what that was like. And reading this book, you definitely get the feeling that people are remembering other lives that either they have lived or other people have lived. It's kind of it's a little ambiguous until the very end. I don't want to spoil anything. It's just kind of profound the way the book sort of posits all of these different ways that their lives could have gone. I think Nora and Jacob have one of the sweetest romances. I absolutely love their chapters. Their relationship, you know, it's very easy and effortless. They seem to already know each other. They seem to already know each other almost from the moment that they meet. And they have a very easy life. There is a way in which their life and their relationship and their marriage, you know, they're sort of pretending, but they're not pretending. They have a real relationship. And their chapters were some of the best for me to read. They you know, they really were endearing and loving and lovable. And I loved their chapters so much. I think with Ivor, who is the grandfather in the family, and Ola, who is Nora's cousin, there is a whole aspect of the relationship dynamics in different families, and how sometimes the drama that you feel just sort of doesn't matter because the world is ending, right? The other thing that I kept thinking about throughout reading this book is, you know, why do we waste so much time? Why do we not tell people how we feel? Why do we not have the conversations that are important? Why do we assume that we could always do it later? And maybe what we should do is not assume that there is a later. Maybe we should assume that we have to do it now. And that, you know, I think if I take one thing away from this book, that's going to be the thing that I take away. This book, a lot like Beautyland, I kept wanting to like make it last longer in the same way that I wanted Beautyland to last longer. And when I finished, you know, I cried through the last 10% of this book because it was so sad and beautiful and charming, but also like deep. When I was done, I just sort of sat with it again. I mean, I said the same thing in my Beautyland video, that I just had to sit with it. I had to sit there and take it all in and digest it, because that was all I could do. And, you know, I feel like books like that are some of the best books. And that has me really, really wanting to read more literary fiction. And I think I'm going to try to put more literary fiction on my 2025 list than I have historically. If you want to read this book, I highly recommend it. I think it's a great book, and I would love to hear what you have to say in the comments.